All right, we're going to get started. Thanks everyone for coming tonight, and we'll call the roll, and I'll ask Danielle, who's our note taker for the night, to go ahead and call the roll. And make sure you, make sure you.
Mark Prince. Kate Massananti. Here. Brian Mahoney. Here. James Manny. Here. Chip McGare.
Here.
Raquel Pellerin is absent. David Palazzetti.
Here.
Lucas Murray.
Here.
And Danielle DeSimone.
Perfect, thank you. We'll move on to approval of the meeting minutes. So I sent out minutes from February 2nd and February 16th. Hopefully you've had a chance to review them. There's copies in front of you if you have not, but does anybody have any objections to voting on this today? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from February 2nd and February 16th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes February 2nd and February 16th, 2023.
Thank you, Kate. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chip. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, motion passes. All right, we'll move on to new business items. What's that? 7-0, yeah. Discussion regarding public correspondence. So I need to post the most recent public correspondence. I do know that Doral has sent some out that I think is useful, and I'll make sure that gets out to the committee. Some of it I've already sent and was already sent to the committee. But I will post that also on the website I'll put it on Monday. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. I'll move on to the chairperson's report. So, good news is Town Council has approved to move forward with the referendum for $125 million, which means that we can stay on track with the new high school. We know we had amounts ranging from, I think it was, 38 million all the way up to 150. Considering that the last project was pegged at 85 million, you know, it's a big move and a bold move, and hopefully we can stay positive and be unified. The positive was that, you know, we went through a lot of deliberation on this, and after that deliberation, the town council was unanimous in the vote. That means that we're all kind of rowing together on this project, I think, at this point. And everyone was in agreement unequivocally that the new high school was the priority. So that's our mission lane right now. I have talked to Phil, and Phil can address it tonight. That doesn't mean that we would prepare a stage 2 report that would only show the high school. We can show $150 million worth of projects. It's how we fund it, how we would get there, right? Right now we know that if the referendum would move forward, we could secure the 125. But those reimbursable expenses would qualify prospectively in the report. And so we could look at other projects down the road, and we can continue to plan for that as a committee. You know, plan for the best case scenario, which would be that at somewhere along the line, we cobble together other funding and we can get other projects done. Does anybody have questions on that?
So that was going to be my question, is that when it comes to preparing the stage 2, because we have such deferred maintenance on all of our buildings, if we were going forward with just a project for the high school, would that be approved by RIDE, knowing that we have all this other deferred maintenance in our other buildings? But what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we can build a project that includes everything. It's just that the bond would only be utilized towards the high school, and then, but going forward as debt drops off, can it be reused? Can we access? Because I want to figure out, like, how we have 4 other buildings that need attention, significant attention. So I just want to make sure we're not. I don't want to. I'm trying to edit my word choices. I don't want us to screw ourselves over, because I think it's necessary. We need a new high school. There's no question about it. But we have other buildings that have significant deficiencies that need to be taken care of. I want to make sure that we're covering all our bases and that RIDE will approve our Stage 2 application.
So it's fair, and we do. We know there's deficiencies there. We have probably more than 150 million. And we're on that track anyway to include more than we are going to be able to tackle, right? It sets us up to get the reimbursables. It's a 5-year plan, so who knows what's going to happen in 5 years. And I'll have Phil address this a little bit more because there's other opportunities out there. Like I know, particularly in Coventry, you got what, a $9 million grant for the high school? Something along that way. There's grants available. There's other things available that we could tackle, but it has to be in the plan because otherwise it won't be reimbursable. So I think that the overall strategy, and again, I'll have Phil talk more of this, is plan for those projects, try to move in that direction. We're going to see. There's a lot of time between now and the end of this project, so a lot can happen, funding-wise, project-wise, et cetera. So, any other questions? All right. So I will move on to, I've sent out reminders. Hopefully they've been helpful. I've tried to include the council, school committee, building committee, and RIDE in all of those communications. So I did send one of those out recently. So Mario is aware of our progress. RIDE has been kept in the loop. They're very, and I think Phil can also address this. He spoke with Mario, but the general sense was, yeah, thumbs up, great. You guys are moving forward. We're looking forward to that Stage 2. So I think that's going to be really helpful. I'll move on. We did have a visit with NEASC, and the town manager, myself, Dave was there, and also Phil. I want to thank you for the invite. I think it was a very productive discussion. And Chip, do you want to speak to that real quickly on what your thoughts were on that meeting? And this is the New England Association of Schools and
Secondary schools and colleges.
Secondary schools.
Yep, and so this is the accrediting body, so they come roughly every 10 years, and I say roughly because it's a decennial visit, but, so obviously that's by definition 10, but because of COVID and some other things and a changing of a process, it's actually been a little bit over that 10 years, but going forward, it should be every 10. So we'll know all the details once their report is done, in roughly a month, but they did share some positive news with us, as well as some things that they feel need to be addressed, not to the detriment of our accreditation, but rather to like things that they would want to see addressed. So they're definitely taking a little bit of a leap of faith that we're going to continue to do what we're doing. They did point out that they're impressed with the support for this new building in terms of the bodies that have been working on that, the town council, the school committee, and the building committee. So they were very impressed with that. They did note that like the school's safe. Like we're doing everything we can to make sure that it's safe and it's not in disrepair. Like, and that's a big credit to the work that Brian's doing. But they basically are saying that it's going to continue to produce limitations to student academic needs, optimal efficiency and safety and security, and fiscally imprudent measures to ensure necessary upkeep. So basically what they're saying is that if we don't move in that direction, that what we're going to be doing is continuing to throw good money at something that's limiting what we're able to do. So like, roughly saying that the basic educational safety needs are being met, but that we're limiting the optimal levels of effectiveness and not letting us, we're dreaming big, but the building kind of gets in the way of us being able to do more. So they were, when the report comes out, I think we're going to see that they're saying that a new building is the most rational path from their standpoint, and this is a neutral body of people coming in and looking at everything we're doing. So they did. I do want to close by they went out of their way to say that the school building committee process is impressively transparent, it's scheduled, and encouraging of stakeholder feedback. So I think we spent a lot of time at this committee talking about like allowing people to have to be able to give their feedback, and I think what we should take away from that is that this outside, again, neutral body is saying, you're doing a great job of that. So it's nice to get a little bit of an attaboy there for us, because I don't think it's always there. So, or at least we might not hear it, yeah.
Thanks, Chip. And it was a good meeting. It was positive. I think, they identified, hey, you have challenges in front of you, especially with regards to the facilities. They've got to write up the report based on the now, I think they expressed, of you do have some deficiencies and some challenges, but it'll bode well for the district that we're moving in this direction. And it can be noted that we're coalescing around a new design of a high school. So,
There was also another group of parents who met with this committee, and the parents who, many of them I actually didn't know, which is interesting, being a parent of a senior when the younger kids are coming in and you're not familiar with them. They had nothing but wonderful things to say. It was a very positive group, and the accreditation group they were excited, and there were certain questions they would get answers to, and they were cheering. So they're very excited for us. So all around the process was impressive. So
Yeah, and they were definitely looking for evidence on everything. It was a second full-time job for me while they were here. Yeah, they were good though, and fair.
it's a lot of work. I've been through it. Thank you to you and your staff, and glad we could have the opportunity to participate. So,
Thank you for taking the time.
all right, I'm going to move on, but I'm going to ask that we move up an agenda item. Studio Jade, so Phil has an obligation at 6 o'clock, so I had advised that we could bump up his presentation to next so he could answer questions and move through. So if nobody has any objections, I will move on to Phil from Studio Jade. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Good evening. Kate, I want to address your question regarding the Stage 2 application. Probably in a very near meeting of the School Building Committee, we should talk about what we want to include in the application. It is not uncommon to submit an application for $150 million, because what we want to do in that application is identify projects that RIDE will approve so that within the 5-year window, if funds are available, you will be eligible for reimbursement. If these projects are not identified in the Stage 2 application, you will not get reimbursed for at your base rate, for example. So, no, it would be at your base. It would be at your base. So I think it's important that this committee talk about that, make sure they're comfortable with it, because they may hear, well, yes, $125 million for the high school is the focus, but we may be submitting an application to RIDE for $150 million. And it's just an application for them to approve, so that if you do some of those projects 3-4 years from now, they are eligible for reimbursement at your base rate.
if we do some of the other projects using a different source of funding, for example, he
Mhm.
mentioned a grant. So let's pretend something at PCL Elementary School costs $3 million. We get a grant to fund that, and that would be
Eligible for reimbursement.
100% reimbursement at that time, and it's separate from the $125 million bond.
Correct. I mean, you may have other funding sources, and all the Stage 2 application does is make sure that those projects are eligible for reimbursement. So we should talk about what that application will include, projects that you just mentioned for deferred maintenance, et cetera. So what I wanted to share with you is the presentation and what the agenda is for Saturday, which I am very excited about and should be a lot of fun. So I do think it's important that we update the community that is present at that meeting, and that the town council unanimously is authorizing proceeding with legislative approval for up to a $125 million bond for a new high school at Columbia Street. I think it's important that the message be consistent, factual, and gets delivered. Keeping them informed that the School Building Committee will submit a necessity for school construction application in June of 2023, which is what we just talked about, with an anticipated bond vote in the fall of 2023. And that upon a successful bond vote, construction could begin as early as spring 2025, with completion by summer of 2027. And these are just some broad parameters, but people are going to ask because they'll want to know, will my child be in this new high school? Will they be able to use it?
Can I jump in on that? Because I know the question that will be asked is what about shovel in the ground in 2024 and the discrepancy between those two things?
Sure. So there is this component to the incentives that talks about construction commencement prior to the end of 2023 to be eligible for these reimbursements. And that there's some legislation that may extend that to June of 2024. But it has been an understanding that commencement of construction does not mean, could mean, but does not mean a shovel in the ground, right? It's the aggregation of the team. It's having your construction managers under contract. It's you are actively starting this project. I think it's important that we continue to receive clarification from the school building authority that remains the understanding. It is my understanding today, and I expect it will be as we continue, but trust but verify is a good approach.
A question that keeps popping up so a lot of the questions I'm able to answer, but one that I can't, and it's been asked to me multiple times, so I just wanted to throw it out there was, will we have a School Street or a Columbia Street address? And I'm serious, it's come up a bunch of times.
That actually is up to the post office. So,
Right, it's just interesting that's most of the question I can answer, but that one keeps popping up. I'm like, I don't know.
So if you have a connection to the post office, that's where I would direct that question.
First time I was like, I don't know, but then it came up another time and another time and another time. I was like, I don't know. It's yeah.
So I wanted to simplify the project approach that we're pursuing right now. It looks like $119 million for the high school and $6 million for track and field with demolition of CCMS. So we want to make sure our message is consistent. We're all saying the same things. There may be some variation of this in the future, but this is where we're at. So it's important for people to know why they're spending Saturday morning with us, and we want them here on Saturday to help design and share their ideas regarding the new high school. And this is not a sales pitch. Right? These images are really sales pitches. This is not what we're going to be doing. I don't have much to say other than giving the instructions and what I just presented. So we have a number of activities. Right? This will be the first one. We're going to divide the attendees into groups, and using colored programmatic blocks that we have, we want that group to discuss and arrange them on a provided site diagram that we have for them, and annotate that diagram as necessary so they can convey their idea, and then elect one person from each group to report out on what that group came up with. There's a couple hints that we will give. We have these packets, spread out all the pieces so that you see the gym piece, you see the auditorium piece, you see the multiple classroom pieces. Given the site, this will be a multi-story building, so people need to think that don't try to fit everything on the site. This is a multi-story building, so what does that mean for you? And then certainly they should reference that aerial view that we'll have in the cafeteria so they can just have some context. It'll look something like this. Each table will have the sheet, and they will have these cutout blocks. And as a group, tell me, should the auditorium be closer to Columbia? Should it be at the front of the building? Should it be at the back of the building? Should it be near the gym? Should the gym be on the one end and the auditorium on another. How's the cafeteria factor into this? So there is no wrong answer. It's really meant to be interactive. Someone may say, we want everything in a line. We may want everything in a courtyard. So there will be a couple of us at this presentation, so we will help facilitate if people are stuck. But it's a fun activity, and there's really no wrong answers, and it's a great way for the community to share with us what is important, right? If we get back, half a dozen options, and we see that the gymnasium is front and center, okay, well, that's an option that we need to take serious consideration of as we start putting it together. So that's one activity. The second activity is very similar. We're going to stay in the groups, and we're going to do this activity at CCMS for the field and the track and any future field house. It's a much simpler activity, the fewer pieces. So, and I will tell them, so obviously we've already put these together, and I could tell you I do not have any pickleball courts. However, that's the whole idea, is for the community, you can write on these things. I mean, these are disposable. So you could tear them if a pickleball court is smaller. It's very hands-on. And I look forward to all the feedback that we'll get. There will be a hint for this one, which will be to avoid wetlands. And on that site diagram, you see that we have put them in there for those folks. All right, number 3 is sort of just a graffiti wall that we're going to have. We'll just have a butcher block piece of paper somewhere in the cafeteria with some markers available, and people can just anonymously share any thoughts that they have. Could be about the entire process, could be about programmatic spaces, it could be about green and sustainable features that they'd like to see. This is just an opportunity for someone to anonymously write some things on this butcher block of paper. And number 4 is for everyone to take a tour of what we're calling this image gallery. And we have these pre-printed forms that folks can walk around. We will set up, there's about 50 images of high schools across the entire country. About 11 by 17, we'll have them, they're nicely laid out, the back of the cafeteria. And what we want you to do is just walk through this gallery. They're all labeled, so is your form. And we want you to, your first reaction, is this image appealing, not appealing, or you feel neutral about it? We want to try to get an idea of what kind of imagery the community wants to project in their new high school. For example, is it like there's a picture of a Gothic high school? Is that something that a majority of the community finds appealing? Or there's something that is so modern that maybe it's not appealing? It's just a data point for us to get a reaction to. These are the images. There's 50 of them. We have a nice pre-printed form on cardstock, so you can hold it in your hand and mark it as you go around. And that'll give us an idea of what you think is appealing, not appealing, or neutral. And that's important to us because we will want to start thinking of how this high school is going to be reflective of South Kingstown and what the community is thinking. So that's it. Those are the activities that we're going to do on Saturday over 2 hours. 2 of them are pretty easy, as you just sort of walk around and give me your opinion. The first one is going to take some work. And, I'm prepared for anywhere from 10 to 100 people, so. That's it.
So with that, if anyone on the committee has any input or questions of Phil in the presentation on Saturday?
Just want to clarify one question. So the town council voted 5-0 on $125 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That money exclusively has to go to the high school, correct? Because that is how they voted on it. Like, once we borrow $125 million, and, you know, you show 119 goes to the high school, 6 goes to the track and everything. Just say, someone made a very large donation to the track. That 120, and then the council, they would, you know, their policy, it's a policy on how they spend that money. So they would have to vote again, I'm sure, if we allocate that 6 months to the treasurer. I'm just talking in perfect world. Could that bond money be used? Oh, I'm sorry. Could that bond money be used, the remaining amount, for another project? Or because they voted for it to be strictly for the high school, it just stays at the high school?
So that's a good question, and that speaks to exactly what I mentioned to Kate. The reason why we want to include in this Stage 2 application projects that would be eligible for reimbursement, which is always what you want. You're going to get, at the end of the Stage 2, a memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement, and it's just going to identify the name of the school and the dollar amount. And that is going to equal, at the high school line, it'll say 125. At the Matunic line, it could say 2 million, who knows? What if you then were to be so fortunate to have someone donate something, then you go to RIDE and you say, we received additional funding, we're still going to be able to perform the scope of work, we would like to move 6 million to boom, boom, boom. And that's not uncommon. RIDE typically likes to do that only once throughout the 5-year campaign, although other districts have done it multiple times, but it just appears cleaner when it's done once. It makes it look like you got your act together, you know what I mean? So I would not confuse this legislative approval of up to 125 million with being able to do other work. Luke, do you understand what I mean? We're on two different...
Yeah, well, and it ties into the bond conversation we're going to have, but one of the things I've talked to Karen Grandy and all, that's our next topic, is not being too restrictive on the bond. So some communities have hemmed themselves in with that language, saying for the high school or for a certain amenity. And by doing that, it's exactly what you're saying, Jim, is effectively they have this excess funds and then they have to go back and get another vote to reallocate that funding.
Right, back to the council, see what the policy is going to be, reduce the debt or spend that money somewhere else.
That's the critical piece, is the bond language.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. Phil and I have spoken, just about process moving forward. The idea kind of framework here is we want to get the community input early, and it's good that this workshop is falling early in the process. Things have kind of worked out with the master schedule. But the idea was always to get public input so people feel heard, and that's the first sort of schematic input that Phil will hear and be able to synthesize. But then I've asked Phil to organize a session for the committee to then weigh in on the building design, to push concepts further. So based on the information he hears, he can come back to us, we'll talk, I think we had a meeting on for next week, is to say, this is what the community said, now what do you think? And you can move some blocks around. And then based on that, he can continue to refine the concepts based on the committee's input, the community's input, and then we can kind of go through an iterative process quickly to get to a final schematic design. Because this is a question for you, Phil, at what point do we need to get you moving on estimates? I know it's soon.
Yeah, sure, and that's the whole goal of the Stage 2. It's absolutely important that we want the Stage 2 to be as close to what you want, but it doesn't afford enough time to do actual design. Assuming you are successful in October, you award to the design team. That design team is going to go back to Chip and his group and do the same thing we did a few months ago at an even greater detail, because now the project is real. It is actual. But we want to get it as close as possible so that we can give you an accurate cost estimate that you're going to need for stage 2. And at a project of this scale, our estimators, not ours, we have third-party estimators, they'll need at least almost a month to really do that properly, and then come back to us with questions and back and forth. So if we're looking to submit this at the end of June, we're going to want their work done, through the month of May. Well, before they can estimate anything, we have to draw a lot of information for them to estimate. And that wants to be like through April. So we don't have a lot of time, but we have enough.
Thanks. So with that, I think we do have enough time, but we want to be, as expeditious as possible. And I'm very cognizant of, this is my own opinion, I don't want to sell the community on something that won't materialize, right? So I do think it needs to be advanced enough to show an image that is representative of the final product. So we're not selling one thing during the bond process, having had personal experience with this and another issue in community, where a community was sold one product and then what they got was a completely different thing. So I think we need to be very cognizant of that, of what we're presenting out. You've mentioned, not to throw you out there, but you've mentioned creating a model of the whole campus, right? And what this thing would look like once we get to a certain stage for informational purposes. That model should be fairly representative of what the final product would be. I don't know if others have comments on that, but
The only comment is that more of a concern is, if we're going to do that, do we have any sort of update or status or confirmation that the actual land swap on that piece of property is moving forward?
so that is a very good question. So the land swap's a bit of a different issue, but in the context of this, and we're talking to Phil, and actually, let me turn the video. Okay. Sorry, I'm also acting IT director tonight. So we're moving in this direction, so which tells me that we need to start, I have already initiated the process with DEM to start probing on this, and I've gotten good feedback. We never truly, we kind of left it on the table, and then we pivoted to finance. So we've never really come back and voted on this is where it's going to be. I think we've collectively heard that most people are on board with this. And maybe it's a wrong assumption, I'm assuming the committee's on board with that. But we may want to come back and officially,
Who needs to vote on it, us or our bodies? Because we need to do that like yesterday.
I think we all kind of came to consensus on the fact that that was our preferred path.
Because that's literally what we're talking about, is this is what the community thinks is going to happen. So we want to make sure that that's why that 125 was approved, is that we're going to, because it doesn't work any other way.
Well, and we've shown it to council and the school committee and the recreation commission, who were, I think, what was the vote, Dave? It was to continue exploration of the land
Yeah, it was
swap, right?
unanimous. It was to give our recommendation to the town council to move forward on the land swap. So it was unanimous support for the swap.
So, I think based on that direction, I'm pivoting to, since I already have a relationship with DEM, to start moving in that direction. That has to be a process that started soon. So, and there's paperwork associated with that. So we have the resources to be able to do it. I got to talk to the manager about how we're going to approach that.
In a worst-case scenario, and we weren't granted that permission, and we just said we're doing it anyway, all we would really lose is being able to get those type of funds again, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's the real risk, it's I mentioned this, the carrot and stick. The real, the real stick is, I guess the carrot is the grant funding that you could get. I've received word from DEM that there's no taste at the state to start withholding funds from communities who have not complied. That may stop at some point, but my personal opinion is we have to do what's right for the community, right? And I think we've all heard we want a high school, and this is the best option on the table.
I'm confident, hearing what Luke has described, that we can accomplish this. This is critical to the future of this town, and they will know that.
I want to make sure that our.
No, I know.
Dotted
Yep.
and T's are crossed, because if Phil's going to be building us a model, and we're going to get the community behind it, and then all of a
Right.
sudden someone's going to go, that's bad.
No, I agree. But I'm confident we can get this over the finish line.
Yeah. Kate, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is a concern. But, so Luke presented, you know, both the carrot and the stick to the rec commission, and with the full understanding that if we didn't get approval, that we wouldn't be able to get future, you know, federal land or grants. Pretty much the discussion at the table, we didn't vote on that specifically, but the discussion was, we're probably not going to take any more of those grants because of the restrictions that they're putting on us. So they're very small, and they're extremely restrictive, and we already have a good land management program and within the town. So there's no concern by the rec commission. Very different than the last land swap we talked about.
Dora. All right, so to clarify for the benefit of the members here, we've been talking about Hazard Field being the location of the new high school and keeping the students in place during construction. That was what was presented on February 22nd. After exploration of what would be required of that, I've since spoken to DEM, National Park Service was involved in this, is that all indications were that that could be done through a conversion process. We have 3 years to do it. We would have to file the necessary paperwork, which includes some maps and an application that gets run through DEM to the National Park Service, and essentially would take the existing Hazard Field, which is under that land and water conservation restriction, and swap it for a new field to be built where the current location of the current high school is. So we'd effectively build a new building on the Hazard Field, keeping the students in place, requiring us no additional swing space, and then when the building is ready, we would move the student population into that new school, and we effectively would demo the existing high school and build a field. At that point, the conversion would be completed, and the land and water conservation restriction would be then put on the new field. That would comply with the federal regulations and would therefore be eligible for future grant funding. I have received, to this date, positive indication from both DEM and National Park Service that it is a highly probable project. Nothing is guaranteed in this process, including all the ride things that are out there, anything. So it's the best information we have to date, and I think we all have said this is our best option. So I think that's where we're focused from that standpoint. So-
Can I just interrupt with
Yeah,
that
I
and just say, that is nitty gritty, that we're not even there yet. Like, that's planning, like, stage 3, that's not part of this. Like, we can't answer that question.
Doral, this is being live streamed, so it's no
point of order.
disrespect, but I just want to make sure that whatever questions you're asking get asked. I promise you, I will have enough time tonight so you can get up there and ask the question, so for the benefit of others watching, they can hear the question and we can answer, okay? Just as a matter of protocol.
Point of
But
order.
I'd be glad to answer that question.
Return to the agenda, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
So without, Phil, are you good? I know you need to move on. So what I will do is, since we're done with that, I will allow, since that was a pretty big topic, some public comment on that, unless we have any objection. So I'll give 3 minutes. So Doral, if you'd like to come up to the mic and ask the question, come on up.
Well, that was the only question I had about,
Just restate it, just so,
so when the swap is the hazard field, which all these years has just been a grass field where high school or, the lacrosse team practices there, or whoever needs a field to practice on, and then when school's not in session, people can go and, run around and stuff like that. That's different than what you've mentioned a few weeks ago, where the upper field was going to be a soccer lacrosse field, and the lower part on Columbia Street was going to be a practice football field. So if that was what you wanted to do, because it's next to the high school, does either of those entities, the soccer lacrosse field and the football field, is that an equal swap to what you have today? That was all my question was.
Yeah, so there might be some confusion. So on the second, and the slides are online, so you probably want to go back to those. What was shown was where the existing school is, basically a field equivalent to the current size, right? A little different geometry, but basically a rectangle, right? Or almost a square. And on that, there was multiple fields shown kind of overlapping, and those are dots on a page. The idea would be that field would be, right now, I think the thinking is natural turf, very similar to what it is now. It could be lined in many different ways. So it's very equivalent to what's there, it's just swapped. There's no formalization, and land and water regulations, the way it's stated is it can't be used specifically for school use. And if we are going to use it in a more regimented schedule, that schedule is really supposed to be transmitted to the National Park Service once a year.
Okay.
So it'll be equivalent to what's there now, is the goal.
And the thing on Saturday, with the blocks and all that stuff, is that done to a certain scale? What? Yes, it's a scale. Could you tell me what the scale is? Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody else have anything on that topic while we're on it? Or Phil's presentation specifically? There'll be public comment at the end, yeah, on general topic. All right. So then we'll move on. Thank you, Phil. I know you got an obligation, so, but you said you will be back for tail end questions? Yes, I will. Okay. All right. Okay. So I will move on to the review of the town bond council and regarding school bond legislation. So I did have a meeting with Karen Grandy, who's from Locklord Group, which is the town's bond counsel, and counsel as far as, legal counsel. All she does for that firm is this, work as bond advisory capacity for communities. I've worked with her before. She's very sharp. She has done many of these bonds for schools. So we're in good hands. She had mentioned, some of the concerns that were brought up tonight. You don't maybe want to be so restrictive, some lessons learned that she's had. Brian has worked with her, our finance director, before. So I feel very confident that she'll be drafting legislation. I received a draft copy today. Brian will be reviewing it. I'll be reviewing it. We'll be reviewing it internally to make sure that it fits, because ultimately council is going to have to vote on that legislation to move it up. We went through the process with her. She has contacts at the State House already. Obviously, we'll need a sponsor, but she can transmit it to the House's legal representation there in the Word format, and they can put it in the proper form to get moved through the House and the Senate.
And this is the actual language that will be on the ballot?
Correct. Yeah, it'll be in the legislation itself, right? Because we need that enabling legislation. So to the earlier comments, we don't want to make it so restrictive that we don't have mobilities of some of the funds. If we were to, let's say, quote unquote, save some money, who knows what the market's going to be by the time we get this project bid. Hopefully it levels off. So it was a productive conversation and things are moving in the right direction. The goal is to have that ready for the 27th, which we have a pretty full agenda, right, Jim, on the 27th. But I think we need to get this sent up. So the goal, and as I said, I already have a draft. I think we'll have it ready to go on for the 27th docket for a vote. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, so things are moving along. All right, discussion regarding the school bond referendum and timeframe. I put this on because right now there's two options I believe our clerk has given us, and I don't know if we've come to kind of a preferred on it, an October timeframe and a November timeframe. And I know that the group had talked earlier about a preference of, I think it was November. The only concern I have on the October would be that I'm not sure we're going to have the stage 2 fully back yet. And I guess that's a question for you, Phil, whether you think we'd have it back yet with that June 30th submission. And it might be a question more for Mario, but based on your experience, any thoughts?
So I remember in the past when we submitted, going back years, we submitted, yeah, and Phil, if you don't mind it being on the microphone. So if we submit early, they give back comments and then you can resubmit.
We should ask the school building authority. We have never submitted a stage 2 early. So we've either done it in February or September. So I know they've asked us to submit early. It's probably good. They are expecting a number of submissions, so it will make their review easier. But I don't know if any approval would come sooner. That's because we should clarify with Mario, but I would expect that they do their reviews, then they go to the Council on Secondary Education and present, and then they approve, and then RIDE sends your approval. So although we submit in June, you may not have your actual approval until October or early November. But Mario can certainly comment.
So what I'm hearing is I need to make a phone call
Yeah.
to Mario and get it clarity, because that's going to matter. I do think having a confirmed stage 2 and that letter in hand would make a big difference, because it validates the reimbursements. So, Mark?
I do recall Mario indicating that if we submitted at that time of the year in the late summer, that there's less demand on his office, and therefore turnaround would be more rapid than during the high peak times of the year. I think it's a good idea to reach out to him to see what you can get for a date. Ideally, from a school perspective, just in the sense of calendaring and setting up the year around everything, whether it be holidays and report card dates and RIDE dates and all those things. The sooner we have some information around the bond date, the better it is for us. We have the 2 dates, draft dates that was shared. They're penciled in. I was hoping to get some clarity from this group this evening to bring it forward to the school committee, because we are late for calendaring at this time of year.
Luke, the only other comment I'd make after you speak with Mario, I think bring that information back, obviously, but don't be surprised if you may not have your formal council approval till after this bond vote. Some communities go to bond without having their stage 2s approved or whatever. I'm dubious of the timing of when they'll go to council and when you'll get that information back. It may be within like a week of your bond vote if you do it in November or something like that. So see what Mario has to say, but I would also maybe internally be prepared that you may be going forward without a formal piece of paper, right? You may have a preliminary recommendation, a preliminary approval, but the actual one from the council, I think is going to come a little bit later.
Just to clarify for those in the room, it's the Council on
Secondary
Elementary
Education, yeah.
Education, not our,
Not town council, no.
because they're the ultimate approvers of the reimbursements. So, noted. So, Dave?
And I would just add that I agree. I don't think, we may not have it, but I think a favorable letter or some sort of support coming from RIDE would be enough to show that we're on the right path. What we got last time was so much red ink, it was very clear that they weren't sure what was going on, and that was some of the confusion the community had. We weren't sure if it was going to get approved. So I think, you know, maybe Mario's not willing to do it, but during your discussion, I'd recommend that you ask if there is some kind of, you know, preliminary support, even if it's not an official letter, but something from RIDE.
There is precedent for that, by the way, because many communities wanted to know what our reimbursement rate could be as we're trying to sell this to the voters. So you do have options.
And really what I'm trying to get from the committee, listen, it really is not our call. It's going to be council's call when they're, and it really is going to be discussion when this comes up for approval on the bond of when they want to hold a referendum. What I'm looking for from the group is some suggestion to them, like what's our general consensus on, you know, do we think it's better later? Do we think it's better earlier? Or are we kind of agnostic on the whole thing and just,
November 9th.
so is everyone in agreement with that recommendation to council that we move to the November?
I will make a motion to have the bond vote on November 9th.
Give me 1 second.
Or whatever the November
Give me 1
7th,
second.
Tuesday.
It's not there yet.
The normal November election day. I was trusting you, Mark.
Yeah, well,
He's the one with
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, well, I should,
Second November, or Tuesday in November,
November 7th.
7th. So November, I will amend my motion to make, requested to have the bond vote on the second Tuesday of November, normal election day, November 7th, 2023.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion on the topic?
How many wedding anniversaries have you missed, Dave, with that type of calendar reading? A lot.
29, actually.
You're still married, right?
Apparently.
as far as he knows.
Without any further discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. So we'll make that recommendation to council. Again, they can, you know, and obviously that's a discussion they'll have on the 27th.
So that gives you 7 weeks to get the contract in place for the OPM.
So we can have this, I'm going to kind of open up that discussion during scheduling, so stay tuned, because well aware we got to get a consultant team together too, so. All right. Anything else on the bond referendum or time frame before I move on? All right, I'll move on then. We've already had planning and coordination. Oh, that's a good question. So we're speaking internally here, right? So Mario Carino is the lead of the school building authority for RIDE. So he is the person who's involved in the day-to-day operations and intricately involved in those reimbursements from the state. So typically is the contact for municipalities to reach out and ask questions, and he's also one of the reviewers and ultimately the sign-off on the letter that we'll get. So he's very important in the process as, you know, as the final approving authority, so. But there's a team there. Yep, that's a good question. It's a good point. We need to sometimes remember to enumerate, right? All right, so we'll move on. The item number 8, planning coordination for the 3/18 meeting. Does anybody have any questions on that beyond what we've already discussed? I will say this one thing on the topic. I know some of the building committee cannot make it. That is fine. I'm planning to be there. I'm going to give an introduction, kind of brief update, and it's really Phil Conte's show. He will give us an update on all the input. We'll see all the data. So, you know, if you have other obligations, I'm not precluding you from coming, but, you know, it's been posted. If we have a quorum, we have a quorum. If we don't, that's fine. And we'll certainly answer the questions that the community has. All right, so then we'll move on. Discussion and action on public outreach and communication activities to include establishment of a new informational website, methods for information distribution. So as we're moving on to kind of a more solid ground with the financials, with the project, we're not going to figure it all out tonight, but I wanted to start the conversation of, okay, what's the next steps on the informational campaign? And how can we clarify information to the public? Because now we're coalescing around a design, a number. I'm already getting questions. People are already starting to come and say, hey, they're starting to tune in now. And I think it's becoming real for the community, especially now we've had articles in the paper, they're reading this. So it's important that we get ahead of the information bubble before things get ahead of us. And so one suggestion I had earlier was a newer website, and I know people may be for or against that. I'm interested in input. I would love input on that. The thinking is that even though it's not in the town standard format, it would be maybe more visual and engaging so that it's not so, I'll just say it, vanilla to our site. And then we get a little wordy on our website. It's a little tough to follow sometimes, and I'm interested in community input on this. And then we do have a 300th anniversary going on. This is a landmark project. So, I think there's some tie there. Whether we like it or not, this is a momentous project and a momentous time. And then I had already mentioned the scale model that Phil had offered to do. He did one for me previously for another project, and it was fantastic. He cut all the terrain, had a light-up building for a new addition. I mean, he really took it to a new level. So.
Like float size, and it could be part of the parade.
This thing was pretty, it was about the size of this table. I don't know how we carried it in, but, so logistics are an issue.
Statue of Liberty.
But it's something we can put on display at the library. We can move it around town. We could have it at special events. So, So anyway, I've spoken enough. I'm interested in input from this committee on things that we can do to start getting information out in an effective manner. We can go around the table, and I'll actually change it up tonight, Dave. I'll go to my left. So you're welcome. You taking a hard pass, or?
Yeah.
Chip?
I think that if it's plausible to have a state-of-the-art website, I think it makes a lot of sense. It is really not difficult for me to link a new website to the same spot on our website that the town one is currently linked to, and I would imagine that from the town website that people are used to going to, you could just as easily link to something there, so it's redirected. But I think the more visual it is, the less questions people are going to have, because I think it's, like we had I think what Doral was bringing up, we had the practice fields out there, right? And I know that's there to say, like, we could do this. This is possible. It's not to say it's going to happen, but it's possible. I think having the things out there that are plausible with this and realistic, I think it's important to share that information as in a visual as possible. And I like your idea about the table model and floating that around as well.
Anything beyond the website? Just before I move on. Anything? Okay. Mark?
So one thing I learned very quickly this past week was no matter what we did with that energy aggravation, I call it, not aggregation, well, kidding aside, we didn't do enough. And we talk about social media, we talk about websites, and that's all great, and that is the way to go. But we can never forget, there's a lot of people that just read newspapers, direct letters, mailings, the traveling, visual, I think would be important. We never want to be criticized for not doing enough for everyone. And so I think a professional website is a great idea, but I also think the traditional mailings, newspaper, interviews, maybe I'll call the news meeting, you and I can sit together and be interviewed about this project and do that, and maybe the school committee and maybe the town council can be interviewed at a later date, but keep it in the news as best we can so that we're not surprised at the end of the summer when a lot of people didn't know about it.
Thanks, Jim. And along those topics, like what are the things we're distributing? One of the things we do distribute is tax bills, right? Whether we want to include it with that, I don't think, I don't know, but it kind of sends the wrong message, I guess. But You know, I know there's mailers that go out for the school. We may have other mailers, anything we can piggyback. So, you know, if there's any ideas on that. What's that? Yeah, I know. I guess the mailers in this town are a volatile project, right?
I get to appreciate the last one.
Newspapers, good idea, Jim. But, you know, we'll touch on that, but just, we're setting the seed, right? As you go around your normal activities around town, you know, I always say, meet people where they're at, right? Where are they on the weekends? They're at the grocery store, they're running errands, they're doing things in life, right? Even people who work outside of town come back, and they may not, like, there's a lot of commuters who go and aren't really paying attention to town, then on the weekends they're coming back. Where are they? Where can we meet them where they're at? And so, I don't know. I'm looking for that input to say, you know, maybe we do put something at Belmont. Maybe that model goes to Belmont for a week, you know? Put it in places that, you know, not everyone comes to a town building, you know? They just don't. Especially these days, we have a lot of online permitting and things, so volume is lower.
I think it might also make sense to embrace the historical aspect of this. I think it's important to acknowledge that this was not the only South Kingstown High School building that ever existed. That there was other spaces where the high school was. I mean, we're talking back to 1880, exactly right. So there's 74 years there that was not where the high school was, and I think you're talking about the 300th anniversary and also pointing out that like we've moved buildings before. This is not like this has never happened before. So I think that's important to embrace that history too, and in a visual way if possible. I know there's old pictures floating around of like a principal in a top hat and coat in front of the Hazard Building, you know, saying this is South Kingstown High School. So there's certainly pictures out there.
I mean, Joanne Esposito.
They tried that right before the pandemic. Actually, I said I would do it. Yeah.
A reenactment?
Of this picture, it was a very old photo. I said, sure, why not?
One thing that comes to mind is Joanne Esposito has been very active in the 300th, and that whole group has been very active. Is maybe we could approach them on an exhibit, like task them to work with us on an exhibit, historical exhibit of schools throughout time, and tie it into the 300th campaign of old to what the future, right? You tie it into that whole legacy. It's a thought.
So June 17th is that parade, the 300th anniversary parade. I know you talked a little bit about it. There's going to be a lot of people there. There's going to be thousands of people. I would guess almost exclusively South Kingston residents. So, maybe something there, like we kid around about a float or whatever, but maybe that model could go right in the middle of it. I don't know.
I'll have them build a bigger model out of cardboard or something of, something. Or maybe it's just a big visual that goes on a float. You know, it's a visual of what the school would look like. And
Was the food?
that shoots candy out of the roof.
Next to the alcohol? Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? I think all kidding aside, there's going to be ice cream, there's going to be everything here. So put it right where that is. But, that idea of a professionally done big billboard, like similar to one of the signs they put up on Route 1 that we're dealing with. So have that on a float, something like that.
So, so I'm glad to. Yeah, no, and I'm sorry. We'll move on. But if anybody is willing to help coordinate that, I'm more than glad to help. But, so we'll move on. So, Brian?
I was going to say, too, with the 300th Committee and Joanne's work, every month they have a speaker series at the high school, and we've had great turnout, over 100 people every time, pretty much. So if we could set up something there in the existing high school with not for the next maybe few series, but even if it was a poster board or a table, just to get started, because we're getting people from 5 years old to in their 90s showing up to these events, and every single time we've had people come and say, oh, I haven't been here in 20 years. I haven't been here in 30 years. Can I look at the gym? Sure, go take a look at the gym. I think that's exactly the market of people who might not be active in watching this right now, but if they saw that at these community events, it would be great to get them involved.
So what I'm hearing is we probably want to get, and Phil's not here, he doesn't know the storm that's coming. But I think he could work on graphics for us, and we could maybe get a standard kind of table set up with boards, so that way that could be mobile and go to events, right? Maybe this event this night and that event another night, but we're keeping it in people's minds that this is out there.
Well, and I know he has, at one of the open houses for the high school, he came to that, and he had a little display, and he had a laptop with like slideshow going, and that was.
It's been to a couple of our events, yeah.
Quite a while ago,
Yep.
like, so, love that idea, especially when the folks are coming in and you walk in and you're like, I haven't been here in 20 years and it's exactly the same as when I left, and.
Yeah, last time we had a couple, I would say, mid-'80s, and the wife had taught there about 30, 40 years ago, and her daughter had actually taught in the system too, and the husband used to play sports again in South Kingstown. So they just thought it was awesome, even just coming in for the speaker series, like, wow, this is great.
And then if
So-
we have the whole, like, this is what it could be, or this is what it might look like, and having that, and creating that energy, so it's a great idea.
Also, my second topic is I volunteer to drive the float.
I think we do need to have,
Right.
just reminded me of when you were talking about people seeing the gym. I mean, it's nice to go see those things, but one of our mistakes last time was that we didn't let people kind of wander around the building at specific times and see what we called the behind-the-scenes tour with the NIAS team. I think that's important. Taking a step into where the heating is when that's at full tilt and feeling how hot it is in there and how cold it is in other parts of the building and seeing locker rooms and so forth. We do need to at some point make sure that we have ability for people to walk around and see things that they don't know. Like, you might come into the auditorium and say this is okay, but not understanding, like, oh, this is where the kids go to the bathroom, and this is what it's like in a classroom, and this is what it's like in when the heat's on and when the heat's off, and so forth. Just my 2 cents.
School committee meeting when we're all literally bundled up in our parkas, right?
Well, that's something, we can work on, is identifying dates for some walkthroughs and maybe engage in that. So if you could at least aggregate some thoughts on prospective dates and what that would look like, that would be very helpful, Chip.
Yeah, I mean, my question with that is if we're shooting for November 9th and we turn the heat on in October, theoretically. Yeah. That it might, I don't know if we want it closer to that. Once the heat goes off, it's I think that's a missed opportunity. We wound up getting into a discussion, and everyone was after about a minute of the discussion while we were in there, was about ready to leave. It was like it was so hot in there that you just wanted to step out into any other part of the building, because it's just where the actual boilers are. It's like, it is hot when those things are cranking.
It's good too, because you can see all the phases of the building and see, someone can walk the halls and not know what's behind a door that has a lock on it. But when you see that and you open it up and say, wow, this is ancient, and we understand this is wasted space, and, this is why this building, needs to be right-sized for, modern times.
So just things to think about if we want to go sooner rather than later, or do we want to keep that as sort of as closer to the actual event. Although I would say the third floor in the older part of the building in the middle of the summer is also quite a treat.
So let's follow up on that. I'll put it on the list for follow-up so we can nail down some solid dates, whatever that may be, and use that on our list. Kate, you're still talking now.
So I know in the past, when we had our OPM, they had a group that came with them, and they did the website. And they did a nice website. It just was, the website itself was nice. It was just the information that was being given was where we were misstepping, I think. But I feel like that could also be part of it. And I know Phil can do a lot, but he also will be limited with what he can do, because he has many other districts that he's working with. So I'm not sure what the OPM process is, and I think we're going to get to that, but I know in the past, when we had Mr. Bradner, we had, Horan Associates, I think was Chris Horan. It was just, they had a whole team that was prepared to help us. And I think taking all of the different ideas into account, they could actually do it versus, like, these are all great ideas, but who are the bodies that are going to do it?
It's a good point, and it's already crossed my mind, right? So, and this is another thing that the committee's gonna have to discuss. The last time, like some communities have taken different tacks, right? One is, it's more of a yes campaign, that's gotta be done outside of our committee, right? That's not our role. And we have to be very clear on that. What we push out as information, if other people are pushing marketing, that's gotta be a separate thing. And it was funded, in part, everyone knows, partially with union money. That's a strategy. The other strategy is we push out good information and we focus on that and we just let it fly. Either way, though, if we're going to have a website and it's informational and it's interactive, right, you're able to click through a design and the pieces of that design comes up and videos and all that good stuff, that costs money. So that's something that I'm going to have to go back to the town manager and the superintendent and say, how do we make this work? Could we fund it? Because we've already funded Phil, right? So could it be through him and others?
I have a clarifying question. When you say that information was pushed out and was funded by the union, that's not the OPM work.
So the OPM is typically hired by, and I'm sure it was, well, I'm not sure, was it hired by the
It
school?
was the school committee. So I just want to be clear about the comment you made, because I don't want that hanging out in the community. Please clarify what you meant by your comment around support and funded by the union.
So the union paid for the mailer, I believe, in the last process. Am I in error of that? I think they donated $20,000 to the. It was the builders.
Are we talking about the emailer or? But
Multiple.
that-
I'm not trying to open up a can of
That was
worms.
not funded by the union. It was not funded by,
The town wasn't funded by the town.
funds were raised by an external organization.
Correct.
That paid for that mailer. It was not through our school district entities, and it wasn't through like a union, it wasn't within our school district. It was an external organization that raised funds, and some of those funds, yes, came from people who were part of the union.
Right. So
But
if
the-
I'm understanding this correctly, the mailer or a mailer that went out was funded by, and it was led and funded by however it was funded, but it had nothing to do with our association, had nothing to do with the school committee. The blowback may have been the blowback, right? But it was not,
Right.
right. Yeah. Right. Right, and I'm sure that there were people in the community who contributed to the A mailer, right? Okay, so I just want to make clear that of
Official
the
capacity.
official capacities and no lines were crossed. The other thing is that if you hire an OPM, right, and part of the work spec is to produce factual information, that's part of their job. There's nothing funny about that. That's not a yes campaign. That's, hey, we've hired you to be part of this process. Here are the things you have to do, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And part of that could be managing the website, getting information up there, managing social media, getting factual information up there. There's nothing wrong with those things, is all I'm saying. So I guess to summarize, our association, the School Districts Association, the school committee in any official capacities were not actively involved in a mailer, and that work responsibility of OPM who's hired can include putting factual information, public relations information, managing social media and websites as part of the task.
All correct. I don't have any dispute with that. And I'm sorry if I inferred that at all. It is a muddy thing that happened last time because it was an outside group. I'm simply making the point of there has to be a clear delineation, you know, because it can get muddied. Especially like information has to flow, right? It flows from the committee because we're creating a project. So I'm simply pointing out that we need to figure out a way to get from here to there. Data from here, whatever. And make sure this all flows. So OPM is a way to go. We are going to need an
Your
OPM.
point, when you were referring to a yes campaign, like you said, that's outside of all of our purview, and that's out within, if there are PTO organizations or if there are groups out there that are they want to champion
Yeah, how
this,
about it?
then that's their role.
That's their prerogative, yep, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm just more worried about, like, what are we gonna do at this point, right? How are we getting good information out? What people do with that information are outside groups that take that information and propel it.
My understanding, though, is a project this size, we're required, part of the requirements is to have an OPM, correct?
Yes, yes, and we will need to hire one sooner than later.
We go out to bid for that, right?
Correct, and we have to, we get to decide when to bring that organization on board.
The sooner the better would be the best bet, right?
Yeah, so let's wait until we get to the schedule on that, and,
We're also, I'm not sure, we're a little off the agenda, and
yeah.
I'm often the one that calls us to task, so shame on me.
So we're a little off, but that's okay,
Shame
because,
on
you
me.
know, it's part of the marketing conversation, so. Did you have anything else, suggestions, Kate? No? Okay. And Dave? Everyone sucked up your airwaves this time, right?
Don't underestimate the power of the model. We did one for the URI $100 million bond, and I've initially was against it, thinking that everything should be video. And web pages are great, and newspapers directing people to web pages and handouts at events that direct people to websites, awesome. But there's nothing better than somebody staring at a model. I found out because we brought all the state legislators through, and all of a sudden they were like, hey, let's do this. Before that, they weren't really interested. So when you see it, you want it.
Still something very appealing. I used to work for the city of Boston. They had a full-scale model in my office of the Boston Common and Public Garden, down to the detail of every person walking a dog. And you could get down, and you could really feel yourself in that space. And I think there's just something about a model that you can do that with. So anyway, all right. And you know, you've already heard my spiel. I think, you know, website's great. We can talk about the OPM, how that all works. I was just trying to garner the float. I think I agree with Jim. It's a great idea. Brian, get your truck ready. And I will volunteer to reach out to the 300th and start the conversation. Like, how would we get into that, and what are the logistics? And speaking with Phil, and then let's see what materializes in the coming weeks. I'll come back and report back and what we need logistically to make that happen. I think it's a great opportunity to get in on that parade. All right. Anything else on that topic before I move on? Okay. So we'll move on to the schedule and related project-related items. So we're a little off schedule, but I think we're back with this meeting. You know, we had to bump one of the previous meetings to have the council meeting, which was fine because we built in a little bit of float. But at this point, I'm hoping to stay on track. So we're on the what's today? 3/16? So we're on the 3/16. We've been giving report outs to the town council. The town manager has made a point at every meeting. I don't know, Mark, have you been doing report outs, or Kate, have you been doing report outs on the building committee activities?
We did one. At the time, we were waiting for more direction from the town council, but it's on the agenda with our subcommittees.
So that's one thing that would be really helpful, I think, for us to, like, whoever's designated, to have that consistently an agenda item, and we commit to do the same. Like, every council meeting, we've been giving updates, but it's not just for the committee, it's whoever shows up at the committee meeting. So being consistent of voice on those updates is I think, critical. So that same information is being conveyed. We're consistent not only to the different respective elected bodies, but everyone who's attending is a consistent message from here forward. Does that seem reasonable? So maybe, I mean, is there any suggestions on effectively doing that? Do we want to come up with some, like after the meetings, come up with some points for briefing?
If we come up with talking points, we can certainly do that. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well, that's fine. I think we could figure out the best way to do that. I mean, you're the representative.
So, we do talking points for council anyway, or I typically, Jim will call me up, I give a very brief thing. So what I can do is a few bullet points that I can send over and just say, here's what I'm gonna say, right? If you have additions, feel free to add on, and then that way we're just giving the same information out. I think it's just coordination, because we're not gonna have a joint meeting every time, right? One thing I do not have on the schedule, and I don't think we built it in because we weren't sure yet, but it is certainly on the sort of spectrum, is OPM, architect, consultant team in general, selection. Now that we have some clarity on financing, we are gonna have to start moving because we can't wait until November to hire a team or get a team in place. So OPM, typically it's short money during this process, very short money, typically under 10 grand, to get an OPM on board and have them work with us. That may not even be the OPM that we use in the stage 3. Sometimes it is, and that's why it's low cost. They typically want to get in. And you've been through this with Peregrine and Sam Bradner, who I also know. So there's a couple ways we can approach that. They're on the MPA, so we could literally select 4 or 5 off the MPA, interview and select. It's not necessarily we have to go out to bid. We're probably going to likely get the same few because there's only 3 or 4 that work on these projects, and they typically are the same ones. And then you have the architectural team, which also needs to be selected, which we could push a little bit further. We're obviously going to want to have a schematic design so they know what they're looking at and a firm scope on the stage 2. But over the summer, I think at a minimum, we need to start working on architect. My opinion, I'm looking for input. But I think by the end of the summer, early fall, we want to have an architectural team in place and in hold. So if we get a positive bond vote, it's like, get to work. Does that sound like a reasonable strategy? And we can build that into the schedule. I'll work with Phil to kind of build it into the master schedule on RFP and selection. And, I'll be certainly working with Mark and Jim on trying like, how would we fit all that in? And also, bills got to get paid, right? So, does anybody have any input on that? Took up a lot of airwaves on that one, but.
So are funds available now to get an OPM to help you with the RFP?
So, short answer is not to my knowledge, because I checked and most of the money is encumbered that is available under the school capital fund. Although, if it's short money, I think we could figure it out. And I'll have to talk to Brian and Raquel and say, how do we make this work? So for short term, I think we could get somebody on board.
I mean, as you know, the key to getting a good architect is having a good RFP. And we're not fully qualified to write an RFP, but an OPM would be able to support us with that.
Right.
I guess the question is, if you're talking short-term or long-term, what would be the work specs for the OPM in the short term? The RFP could be part of that. Participation or contribution to the interview process of an architecture firm. I mean, you can think about this. We may want to think about what we want that OMP short work to be. That might also dictate the cost, and then that might then lead to the conversation of how we fund it, right? So.
No, I agree. I think we could get an OPM just to write the RFP. To help us through the selection of the architecture firm, and then go out for a bigger contract to get us all the way through construction. So I agree. If funds were available for that smaller amount, just to get really support to write the RFP. And there's enough templates out there. We've got the old ones, so it's not a huge heavy lift, but there's some billable hours that are going to be necessary.
Yeah, part of the reason I know Sam is I did exactly that. I wrote the RFP. Sam ended up ours. Yeah, he was very helpful, but we only used him for that short term. We had a limited scope. He was helping us write the architect scope, and also now if we're going to add website and things like that, obviously he's not going to do it or she's not going to do it. That OPM would go out and typically hire a marketing firm. But we could work that in, and Mark, you're right. Like we need to develop a scope and then kind of see where that cost is going to lie. It'd be nice to get an estimate, because if we're going to scrape up money now to make that happen, because we don't have a bond in place, and we're working on respective budgets right now, and I don't think either of us have a lot of monies built in for the school building project. So it's something we're going to have to work on. So I'll put it as a running item. We are going to have to start focusing on OPM. So in addition to the schematic design, I think that's the next priority item, is getting the OPM selection teed up. And just for the benefit of the community, we're watching OPM as owner's project manager. That individual is our arm of getting the project done, right? They're going to be the day-to-day staff to get the work done while we go out about our respective lives, come together and guide that person, just like another elected body and administration.
I want to make it very clear, because this was, it's a question that happens every meeting, and it's happened year over year. It is a ride, it's like a ride, we have to, it's a requirement. It was the same conversation, why do you have an architect and engineer? It is a requirement. We cannot proceed without.
Because it's a lot of money.
Make that on the record. We cannot proceed without it as a requirement.
None of us are quite frankly qualified or have time to run a project of this size. So that person is the day-to-day getting the grind work done, reporting back to us, and we're the oversight committee along the process. And that OPM, we might have one OPM taking us through architect selection, we have a different OPM, but at some point, we're gonna have an OPM that is gonna be saddled to us for years, that is gonna take us through this entire project until we put the plaque on the wall and dedicate. So that, it's an important selection, especially when we make the final selection on stage 3. Right now, we need somebody to take care of the architect scope and other things. So we're good with that. We'll put it as a running item. We'll work on the selection, and we'll take down on with a goal of, I would say spring, we want to have an OPM on board. So that way summer we can start doing the architect RFP. Does that sound reasonable? Yeah. I'm just looking at the schedule. So honestly, I think we're going to have to start moving pretty aggressive, because we typically like to have the OPM involved in the estimating process, which is May.
Luke, I'm sure there's people at home don't even know what an OPM is. Oh, you already did when
Yeah,
I
I
ran
did.
out?
I said for the benefit of the community,
Okay,
owners
sorry.
party. No, that's okay. Request for qualifications, I know, enumerate, right? So maybe we shoot for a month from now to have, like, selections moving, like actively interviewing and working towards selection by the end of April.
I would go off the list.
I would imagine that we probably don't know all 4 of them or 5 of them, or know of them, right?
So we can have an interview day, we'll
The
sit them
vetted
down.
list.
So we'll just pull them in. All right, I think that's reasonable. By the end of April, we'll shoot to have that, and I'll add that to the schedule. I'm sure Phil will be glad too, because that's also going to be his point of contact. All right, anything else on the schedule at this point? We'll make some amendments to weave those selections in.
We're meeting next week, as
That's the
planned.
plan. Yep.
Okay.
I think we're going to need to keep up the pace. All right. Yep. And that's on the schedule. We're going to have a quicker pace over the next couple months. It's going to be a bit of a grind, because we've got to get through the schematic design, and then we'll kind of hit a plateau where it's going to wind back down a little bit. So there's kind of this ebb and flow. But right now, the schematic design, the selections, all that's going to take some time. I know we all don't have enough meetings to go to, so. All right, if nobody has anything else, we'll move on to general public comment. I'll ask right now, we're at 6:30, if you keep it under 5 minutes for general public comment. You're welcome to discuss any topics you'd like. So we have 3 people in the room. Anybody like to come up to the mic and give us your thoughts? Give me my time.
I'm Andrew Gilmartin. I was impressed with the amount of work that you guys have been doing. It's nice to hear. It's too bad there are so few people here listening to it. wasn't planning, Oh, good. I wasn't planning to talk, but you raised so many topics that were just of general interest. When you talked about the website, don't think of it a website, it's too passive. You need to make it more active. One of the things I learned over the years of coming to town council meetings is that people are surprised and they come at the wrong time for when you need input. So make it active. That is, people subscribe for emails or SMS messages. Make sure they can stick it on their calendar, things like that. Yes, the model I think is great. You know, every fundraiser around here goes to the supermarkets and they go to the liquor stores. And so the model is, if you can do the rounds, that would be wonderful. The legacy part, yeah, it's all about the future, it's not about the past. The other thing, when you were talking earlier on about the funding and how it could potentially be manipulated later on down the line, I think that's the wrong message to give to us in the citizenry, because we're looking to spend a lot of money on a specific project. It's okay to have multiple projects, but we need to know that this money is being allocated to those specific projects, as opposed to it's just a pool of money that can be drawn upon. So I'd be very careful about not being specific, you know. That's it. But thank you very much for your hard work. It was clear and much appreciated.
Appreciate your comments. And that's a fair comment on the language, so we'll have to consider that. One of the things we do want to be clear is a high school is included in this project, right? So at a minimum, you know, I think everyone needs to know that is the goal, and it's going to get done. Anybody else who would like to have comment?
I think just to reiterate on what the gentleman was saying, we appreciate all the hard work that you all are doing. My background is in marketing and storytelling, filmmaking, other projects. Oh, sorry, Andrew Holt. I just, you know, people get very uncomfortable when they hear the terms marketing and campaigns. So I think it's important for this committee to get the story across. I don't think it's unfair to say there is a story for why the school committee, why the town council, why you all are recommending $125 million to build a building. Of course, there will be yes campaigns, but a lot of people don't show up for these meetings, don't show up for the council meetings. So just getting across the story of why you're doing this is really important. Model makes a lot of sense, but it's also more than just, you know, where the brick's going to go and what's the building going to look like. A lot of stories of like why this is important and why it matters, why the town council is approving it, pushing it forward. That's not marketing. That is informational. There's a decision, and why was that decision made? So I think that's an important component. I think video can help a lot there. I don't know if there's students in the high school, or if it's appropriate for the students in the high school to help support there. My daughter could potentially be one of the freshman class of the new high school. She's got a lot to say as a 10-year-old, and a lot of her classmates do as well. I'm sure they would be happy to tell you why it's important. You know, I think Mr. O'Neill last night at the town council meeting and had mentioned, you know, he had other reasons, potential issues with the project, but he was very clear for why the project was important. And I think just reiterating that and getting community members to explain why they think it's important is critical. So just another component to add. I know everyone's in the weeds on the actual physical project, but to continue to reiterate the why is hugely important, and that's not marketing. It's why was the decision made, and that's informational. So that's all I have to add.
And I would like to put out there, Andrew, that we would be glad to have someone with your expertise assist us, right? You don't have to be a formal member of the committee to assist on these efforts. So as an expert in storytelling, we'd welcome and appreciate your input on that. So, you know, feel free to follow. Okay. Thank you.
And we did do a couple of those things with you know, through the school for like, remember when I was STEM director, Why STEAM, and we did that video, and that was out there, and more recently the Why RCT programs, and that's still available on our website. But I think I agree with that point. It's just short to the point of explaining your why.
Chip, who did those?
So we had, the STEAM one was from a group that we had spent a little too much money on and didn't get everything we wanted. So move on for that. Although the video was really nice, and I didn't ruin it. And then the one that was the CT, we actually had some graduates of South Kingstown High School who at the time were freshmen, I believe sophomores now in college. So, and they actually were trying to get their business up and running. So they did an awesome job. Yeah, they did so many videos for us when they were juniors and seniors, like for escapades or for pep rallies and so forth. So they're pretty skilled. But the point is, short and sweet videos that just explain your why is worthwhile.
My name is Greg Sweet.
Sorry, Greg. I just, based on the comments of the last speaker, I think the future agenda item, I'd recommend discussing what subcommittees we should put together, and then we could invite members of the community to be on the subcommittees, including things like the OPM selection.
You know what, that's a good point, because I'll put that bug out at the workshop meeting. That we're looking for volunteers to actively engage on those subcommittees.
Saturday's meeting, I'm debating on whether to go. Is there going to be soda bread and Irish coffee? Because that's going to tilt it for me.
Maybe some coffee. I don't know if it's however Irish you want it to be.
Not on school property.
Well, but Saturday's a continuation of Friday, and I got
Not on
tomorrow
school
off.
property.
So. Apparently, the school department can get donations for the project. Is that correct? Private donations? Would they be able to get naming? Okay.
When you say naming, what do you mean?
Suppose somebody wants to pay for the gym. Can they get their name? You know, it's the.
There's regulatory stuff we have to definitely look at, and clearly there's some town elements in that as well. To answer just the basic question, can the school department get donations? Yes. Can the school department get donations that are earmarked? Yes. When you start talking about donations for a building project, then there's a whole nother several tiers that we have to go through. But I think it's a good question. We can investigate further and give you some information.
Just to add to that, so we, about 2 months ago, we were trying to name the public safety building as Chief Vespia, and we ran into an issue. Currently, the town cannot name buildings. I don't know if it's an ordinance or a policy or whatever, but we're working with the solicitor now to amend that, so in special circumstances, things can be changed. So I'm sure the schools would be in the same boat as any other town building or facility.
Because that could help get donations.
Greg Sweet.
Yeah, Jim.
Athletic field or?
Yeah, I mean, I look pretty fit, don't I? Yeah, that's probably more correct. More so the kitchen. And, yeah, the whole line. The track, as it stands now, or is this the way it's going to be? Going to tear the school down to put the track up there?
So the way we've looked at it so far is to take the existing facility and take it all down and move the track up the hill out of the wetlands and then upland area. To Phil's point, we're interested in the community about orientation and location of things, but right now that's the envelope we're working with.
Okay. I think that's a real poor decision, but that can be talked about later.
Would you like to elaborate on that, like why you think it's a poor decision, or?
Well, I looked it up, and like the track field, I don't know how many lanes you would have. I think 6 maybe, or 8.
Yeah, 6.
But the length of the field is like almost 600 feet, I think.
It'd be more than that, 300 yards.
I mean,
I'm sorry, 300 feet, I'm sorry. So yeah, with the
600, yeah.
track and the end D areas, yeah, you're right, sorry.
so that may make it where you have to move the tennis courts, and that was a huge thing last time. The other thing that would be a real concern for me, Mrs. Diamond next door, she already suffers from wetlands because of the work that has already been done, and I could see her land become wetter.
Not to argue that point because you are correct, but that the problem exists because of the layout that it is right now. And if if the track is moved, and that field is moved, that eliminates her problem. So that's where Phil and his architects and engineers and the town, I'm drawing a blank, it's not, maybe engineer, they're looking into making sure all that, but the problem exists right now because of how it's laid out. And if that can be removed, that is actually to her benefit.
And to just bounce off that topic, right, if you think about it, you have a roof area that's impervious, right? You're taking all that away. You're now moving the facility, which has impervious area, out of a wetland area. And then we're talking about, we don't know, depending on cost, but if we went with a synthetic turf option, you have a profile of up to 18 inches of loose 3/4 to 1.5 inch drainage layer with tiles that actually a lot of communities use as acceptance for flow. So it may actually present a unique opportunity to accept more flow, infiltration, and slow down the water that's going to that wetland. So we may actually improve significantly the drainage. Now, obviously, you know, my background's landscape architecture. I used to work on these fields, so that's why I'm speaking on that behalf. But I think that, you know, and Dave can contradict me, but I think there's real opportunity here to actually mitigate a lot of the issues that are going on.
Possibly it could create more too, and I say that because right now the runoff goes into sewer drains.
No, they don't even allow that, and we can't. We have a MSDS program, it does not.
Okay.
I know that.
I know if all rainwater went into drains that ultimately went into.
They probably go into that wetland. I haven't done an inspection, but typically they go to a closed drainage system. The old systems would just dump into the wetland. So we would actually be required to create infiltration basins and other water quality inlets. So you can't do things the way they did when they built that school.
Okay.
You just can't.
Something real quick. Do you need another one of those maps for Saturday? Because I've got one.
Yeah, if you want to
Actually,
bring it along, sure.
No, I don't want to. If you don't,
Oh.
if you don't need it.
I mean, we have this one. I have one of a blow up of Hazard Field. I'll talk to Phil. Sounds like that'll be sufficient, but
Okay.
I can let you know.
Well,
And
there's no Irish coffee, so I'm pretty sure.
if you want to bring the Irish coffee, that would be handy.
Not on school property.
I actually got it in my truck. Yeah, I got Curtis Corner in my truck. No, not my truck. I got that at home.
It's a Rhode Island.
No, it was a past project thing.
Wow.
Yeah. As far as getting the word out there, I think you got to keep it in everybody's face all the time. If you can get businesses that do invoicing, if you can get them flyers that they wouldn't mind putting in with their mailers, saves you the cost of mailing. I would do it. So.
Sign you up?
Yeah, I would do it. I I think putting, I don't know what, maybe poster boards or something like that at different locations throughout the town. Wakefield Mall, Belmont's, the bowling alley, a lot of people go there. I mean, just as many places as you can go, just so where anybody goes that they see it, and make sure that the email address is on it. Not the email, yeah,
What was that last one?
website. That's my technical background. I was going to suggest the model on the float in the parade. I think that's big. Chip, I'd be real careful on the walkthrough. If you show them a boiler room that's hot, boilers are running, you would expect it. If you take them through and they see tiles that, ceiling tiles that are falling, that's maintenance. That's not really showing why the school is not a good choice to rehab. I would look at it through those eyes. Like it being too big, corridors not set up right, things of that nature, as opposed to deficiencies like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that does make sense. I will say that that Brian's department has done a great job of with ceiling tiles and all that stuff. Something breaks, it's getting.
I was just using those as examples.
But you're right, because 2 years ago, before we had the work order system that we're currently using, there was much more of that.
Right.
So that's been addressed. I hear you about the boiler room, and I hear your point about it's more about that it's too big of a space, and it's not a logical, not set up logically as well. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Maybe you can have a walkathon around the school in time for everybody.
I think that's it.
Yeah, we actually have 5 now. Just to make sure, give everyone time. Yep. But
I think
we just had to make it with the minutes of instruction, make sure we were in alignment. But yes, that's we do have that. It's a big building. Yeah. But I thank you guys. That makes a lot of sense.
Jim, did you have?
No, not until you're done.
Moving the track up on Curtis Corner and taking that building down, I think the town loses in 2 ways. They could sell that building, get money, and if it's torn down, we have to pay the money. So,
Well, just to be clear, and it's just information, right? The building, we're expecting 50% of the 52% reimbursement on the demo of that building. So, and I'm not saying you're wrong. That's your perspective, and that is what it is, and keep asserting. But keep in mind, South Road has sat there how long, right? And that's a much bigger footprint in not the best shape. So I think the general feeling is at this point, by taking it down, putting it to a recreational use that is favorable to the Recreation Commission and may soften the edges on a compatibility of use, maybe on whole a better option. But I see your point, and you can,
because to me, if I was going to buy it, Jim would have to give me the loan, but if I was going to buy it, I may think the building's fine. I can rehab it to get it to do what I want. So I don't think saying that the building's in poor shape justifies tearing it down, because whoever bought it may have a difference of opinion.
Okay.
No, my 5 minutes is up.
No, yeah, that's what he was saying, but I don't want to cut you off. I know, it's not like we have a full crowd, so I give you a little latitude there. But listen, come to the meeting Saturday.
I can't Saturday.
Oh, okay, but there's going to be other opportunities to weigh in. I understand your perspective, and I respect that, and I think the committee hears you. As I've said, I had an individual come in today because she lives next door to the field, a hazard field, and she found out about the new location, and obviously she was a bit surprised, and you know, she's concerned, right? She's always lived next door to a field. And as I explained to her, we're trying, I think this committee's trying to vet all options to come to the best balance of project. It's not going to suit everybody. We can't keep everybody happy on everything, you know? But I think what we've shown is consistency of data and processing. We'll continue to do that, and, you know.
I
chips
would
will fall.
put 2 big signs up, one on Columbia Street, where the school is now, obviously, and then one in that field, just so people drive by, they look out their front window, whatever. They're going to see it all the time.
Thank you. All right.
Luke, just want to add a couple of things before you wrap up. Just, you guys are on track. A picture's worth 1,000 words, 1,000,000 words, right? So, on my old job, when I was trying to close 3 barracks and build a new $30 million brand new barracks, I got tons of pushback. Why do you need it? Because the outdoor looked beautiful, these old barracks, but inside they were horrendous. I did a slideshow and showed it to the General Assembly and the governor, the decision makers, and showed the deplorable conditions that those troopers had to work in. The boilers, the wiring, the water, the paint, the mold. No one knew about that. All they knew is the outside of the barracks looked beautiful. And immediately, I got criticized for doing it, but immediately it turned everyone's opinion that, okay, we need this. We need better working conditions for the members of the state police. And I'll never forget that. And we got it, almost immediately. I think as hard as it is to show them what the inside of that high school was, when I was there last week with your accreditation people, I walked around, and I've been in that high school many times. It's really deplorable. It really is. There's no way around it. You can't, and I think as time gets closer, a slide presentation should be shown to just show the residents, the decision makers, of why we need this high school. That's one point I want to make. Second thing is, you know, the vote of 5-0 by the town council, that's the first step. I do agree with a lot of the residents. It's going to be a big one to get this to a referendum. We're going to have to work hard to show them why we need it, why this town is a community, and as a whole, we have to do it. And I think part of this, one of the residents came up at a meeting the other night, a budget meeting, might have been last night, so many meetings this week, but he sounded like a pretty angry guy, but his message was spot on. This town needs to show unity at every level. And I think now that you have a 5-0 vote by the town council, and you have, at every one of us and every one of our positions needs to stand together and communicate why this town needs this high school. So the town council, the school committee, superintendent and I, everyone involved. It's going to be, I wouldn't say it's marketing, but it has to show true unity. It has to show this town that we're all standing together and we're all in agreement, and I think that's the only way it's going to pass. So I just want to make a general statement on that.
All right, so without further ado, we'll move on to scheduling the next meeting. So the next meeting is next week, for everyone's benefit, which is the 23rd, correct? Same place, same time, new agenda. But I anticipate that we'll be discussing, so we already have, I will put on for the OPM, we'll be discussing the community input, schematic design moving forward. Those will be the big topics. Does anybody have anything burning that they want on the agenda in addition? That's going to take a lot of time in and of itself. Okay? So move on to adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Kate. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.